welcome. Welcome on a beautiful evening, and let's start with an opening prayer. So, Heavenly Father, first, thanks for this place and all the good it does for tens of thousands of people. Thanks for another beautiful day. And thanks for bringing Andreas and Shelley to join us from Maryland. And guide Andreas to say the words you want him to say, and let us be open to hear what he tells us. He's going to tell each of us something special. So let us be open to what specifically God wants us to hear from him, to be open and accept that and turn it into action. This we pray, amen.
Amen.
So we're going to have a little bit different format today. The professor says, Jack, I want you to ask me the questions. Now, Jack, you've got to give me the questions ahead of time. Unlike his students, he never gives the students the questions ahead of time. But that's the professor, okay? All right. The Swiss Guards have been protecting the Pope since 1506.
Would you believe it?
And from 86 to 88, this man was a Swiss Guard, going all over the world with St. John Paul II. So we're going to talk about that experience. Yeah. Since 2012, he's been with the Catholic University, runs the entrepreneurship program. He believes that business is a vocation. And he's going to talk to us about the gospel of work. A lot of our younger people need to hear that gospel today. All right. Yeah. So with that, it's an honor. Andreas, thanks for coming. Shelley, thanks for coming. So,
thanks for having us.
All right, let's go in real quick.
Let's go in.
Let's start. December 24th, 1986. You're a recent high school graduate, not a good student, by your own admission.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that day?
The fact that I was no good at school is a matter of public record. I grew up in a small village in Switzerland, in the mountains, 400 people, and I learned from a friend that I could apply to become a bodyguard. And I thought immediately that that was the coolest thing you could possibly do with your life. I have to say that the thing with school, I didn't really find out what my life was going to be, what I was good at. As a matter of fact, I pretty much failed at everything before that until Switzerland is a militia, and I went into the Swiss military, and they loved me. I'm one of 6 kids. I have 3 older brothers, there's 4 of us, and I know how to fight because I'm the youngest, right? So I really excelled at that.
You're not the smallest, I don't think.
Not anymore. I was at a time. And anyway, so I learned that I could become a bodyguard, and I'm like, I'm so going to do this. And the guy gave me an address, this was in the 80s, and I had to write to them. And I wrote to them and say, I want to be a bodyguard. And they say, yeah, you can, and against all odds, they took me. If I would have known how hard it was to become one, the selection criteria, I wouldn't have had the confidence to apply. But lo and behold, they write back and say, okay, we want to meet you and everything. And that's when I first realized that the person you protect is the Pope. And I'm like, well, I don't have anything against the Pope. I'm not religious, but, I'm Catholic, I guess. I was confirmed, baptized, And I just wanted to get away from Switzerland and from my failure, in a sense. And I went there, and the Swiss Guards is actually a foreign legion. Can you believe it? Because it's what you do there. If you serve a foreign head of state, you go to prison. This is like treason, right? But since the Swiss have been doing this since the Middle Ages, this is the oldest standing military from 1506. And so we have the right as Swiss to still do this, even though, our founding predates the Protestant Reformation, 1506. And so we have long standing guarantees from the Swiss state, even after they became Protestant, that we were allowed to do this, except that when we join, we give up our Swiss citizenship during that time, and we become citizens of the Vatican, and then when you go back, you're Swiss again without being prosecuted. Anyway, side note. Just wanted to make that clear to everybody. So it's like a foreign legion. When the doors close behind you, that's it. You don't have your passport anymore. You're there, and for at least 2 years, you're not going anywhere. As soon as that happened, and I got in there, and I got into this recruit school and everything, I'm like, oh my God, I made a huge mistake. This was much harder than I thought. I just did this for the looks, for the gun and for the thing, to look good. But once I got in, and this became really difficult. I mean, what you see with the uniform, that's the outside thing, but you're really trained like an elite force. Boy, I wanted to get out of there as quickly as I got there, but you couldn't. And then, to make matters worse, I joined towards the end of the year, and Christmas approached, and on the 24th, on that day, I was actually planning to participate in the festivities. You see, where I come from, Christmas Eve is the big event, like in Poland, right? That's when you celebrate Christmas. Well, we have a heck of a party in the Swiss Guards. I wasn't there before, but I saw all the preparations, and that's what I wanted to go. Lo and behold, I get up in the morning, and the sergeant major comes in and says, you're working tonight, another guy's sick. And I'm saying, no, I'm still a recruit. I'm not, you have the wrong man here. This is the last argument I ever had with the guy, I promise you. I went, that evening, I had to go to work at 8 o'clock in the evening until 8 o'clock the next morning. I was fuming because this was against all the rules and everything, except he makes the rules. The commander gave us 2 favors every year, 2 gifts from the commando. And that is, you get to call home at Christmas and at Easter. And so there was one telephone, 120 men, one telephone downstairs in the barracks. There's a line all around the courtyard to get to this one telephone to call home, because he opened it up, you can call out. I called, my dad picks up, I hear all my family, all my brothers and sisters in the background, they already were at it, I could hear it. And he's like, well, Andreas, I'm so happy to hear from you, and are they gonna keep you? And I'm like, Dad, yeah, as a matter of fact, I passed the test, I'm in, I'm gonna be here for the next 2 years. And he said, that's brilliant, that's a great Christmas gift you're giving me. Now you go celebrate Christmas. We've already started, now you go celebrate Christmas. I said, Dad, I'm not celebrating Christmas. I'm going to work. Only my dad. What? I thought you worked in the Vatican. They should know it's Christmas tonight. I'm like, yeah, I know. But this sergeant makes me work. And my mother, I could see them. My mother was like, listening next to him into the phone and everything. And she grabs the phone. By the way, did I tell you yet that I'm the youngest of 6? Now, my mom and I, we have a special relationship. My siblings call me the baby. I am the masterpiece. I am my mother's masterpiece. When she had me, she's like, bingo. Finally, I have a perfect child, that's it. So she and I have a very close relationship, and she is, of course, hears this, takes the phone, wants to say something, and bawls her eyes out. She cried. I'll tell you a small secret. When my mother cries, I have to cry with her. Except there were 30 guys standing behind me, and I had this image of a tough guy to defend, so I had to choose between my mother and my honor, so I hung up on her. And I go put on my uniform, and I just like crying and go to my post. Now, I was oblivious to all this. I was oblivious that I served the Pope, right? So I was oblivious to everything else. It's just funny how you can be oblivious, yeah?
Certain things never change, Andreas.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still working on the oblivious thing. So the Pope is protected in circles, and it's just, we do the Secret Service for the president. It's the same thing. That's what the Swiss guards do. So there's these rings of protection, and because I'm the newbie, they put me right in the middle of the ring. The Pope lives, they say the Pope lives in a palace. The Pope lives in a 2-bedroom apartment inside a building that's so old it doesn't even have air conditioning, right? But it has beautiful frescoes on the wall. So he lives there, and he has this 2-bedroom apartment with the chapel and everything, and outside is a little room, and it's not bigger than this stage is right here. And in it, there's 2 doors, huge doors on either side, and the guard is in the middle, and you have a little desk, and you can close both doors. You lock yourself in, so you're the last person before the Pope, right? And I was in there, and there's also other exits from the apartment. And I was there, and after, I describe my evening as my perfect emotional storm. That night, I realized that I made a huge mistake for joining here. I realized that I'm not amongst friends. I realized that I'm in a country I don't speak the language, and and I realized that my family is having fun without me. I started to accuse myself of everything that I am doing wrong in life and what an idiot I am. You know the kind. I know my weaknesses better than anybody, and I'm up there losing it. Total despair. I start to cry. I cried for 8 o'clock. By 11 o'clock, my radio goes off. Hey, Widmer, the Pope is leaving the apartment and he's using your exit. Let him out. I'm like, what? Hello? It's the commander saying, let the Pope out. Well, I'm trained for this. I'll give you a secret. It'll just stay in this room here, okay? The thing is, when the Pope, the commander is the only layperson of the pontifical family, the commander of the Swiss guards. Always with the Pope, always has 100% access, can never be denied access because he's in charge of the security. Member of the pontifical household, sees where the Pope is. Whenever the Pope moves, we know exactly where he's moving and what door is at the end of that. And so they just call ahead and say, hey, he's coming to your door, like to me, and all I do, and this is what I'm trying to do, is to turn the key and step back. So I step back. He has no idea he's locked in, but he's always locked in, right? Don't tell him if you ever meet him. So I step back, and this huge door opens up, and I'm in this little room, in a little dark room. By now it's 11 o'clock, and this light comes in, this beautiful yellowish orange light comes in, and in the doorway stands John Paul II. Never met the man before, and he, with his white cassock and his suggetto, and he had this habit that when he was interested in something, he tilt his head. So he tilts his head, he points at me and says, hey, you're new, I've never seen you here before. What's your name? I'm standing in attention. I think I gave him my social security number. I'm like, and then he comes and he puts out his hand to me. And we're trained, if he talks to you and asks you a question, you can write back, you can talk back, but you don't talk to him, he talks to you. You don't initiate a conversation. But he did, and he's like, give hand, then I shake his hand, Courtesy. Our hands meet, and then he looks up, and we look each other in the eye. Can you imagine how I looked like after 3 hours? I looked like a raccoon, after crying for 3 hours. And I knew the second our eyes met, I'm like, oh shoot. He just held my hand. He moves in and he says, oh, of course, Andreas, this must be your first Christmas away from home, isn't it? That was the wrong thing to say to me. So as I'm standing there, I'm holding the Pope's hand, I'm like starting to bawl my eyes out. And I can't say anything because I'm like, by the way, I'm his bodyguard. I'm trained to give my life for the guy, okay? But I am like breaking down in tears, holding the Pope's hand. And he moves in and he embraces me and he says, Andreas, I'm so happy that you're here, that we're going to work together. You're going to see,
Everything's going to be okay. And then he stops, he looks at me, and he says, you know what? I'm going to go celebrate Mass right now, and I'm going to offer it for you. I'm like, okay, that's a good guy. Sergeant, not a good guy. Pope, good guy, right? And this became the beginning, in a sense, of my conversion, of my first falling in love with him, and then him saying, you don't want me, you want Jesus Christ, and sort of leading me through Christ. There's a long story to a short question, a long answer.
Friends,
Praise God.
Andreas gave me the questions to ask.
Yeah.
There's 76 more questions.
Yeah.
It's all as he ended. It's only the beginning. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But can I just defend myself quickly? Well, I'll do it at the end. I'll do the defense at the end.
Go ahead.
No, the reason why we're doing it this way, I want to do these. I do this for a living. My shortest thoughts are 70 minutes long. I talk to students all the time, and I do this. Who wants another talking head in front of them? Isn't it more fun if we just talk with each other and then you join in and I actually answer the questions you have and we become sort of a community? And that's why I'm refusing to do just standing here and talks. I want this interaction, and I think it's going to be good.
Okay. We're going off script.
Yeah.
Shelley's heard that answer 500 times.
Oh, yeah.
Why was it when you started to talk about how you were the masterpiece of the family and the perfect, she walked away?
Yeah. She's heard it before, and she knows my mother.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. By your own admission, you really had no faith.
No.
Did St. John Paul II help you in your faith journey?
His first thing he did is he helped me have faith in myself. One of the things I do is, the reason why I teach is because I feel I'm one of the most privileged, gifted people you will ever meet to have met the man of the century. To me, this is the man of the last century. Think of the changes that have come about in our world because of this. And so I'm like this kid from a village that has more cows than people in it, that's not even on a map. I'm from nowhere. And I met this man, and he had an effect on my life. The least I can do is to turn around and share it with other people. That's why I teach. And specifically his approach to how he converted me is, you see, I was an angry young man. I the physical and everything, because I failed at things and I wanted to reject you before you could reject me, and that was part of my spiel and part of my toughness on the outside. And so I teach in an auditorium at Catholic. I have 130 students in the auditorium, and there will be people right up front. And I know that, and these are freshmen, right, at college, and I know that the kids up front will find a mentor at this university because they pay attention and are right there. But my audience is the ones in the back, all the way in the back. That's my tribe, because that's where I sat. Did you sit there? Yes, you did. No, now you're sitting up here. So that's my tribe, and John Paul reached all the way back in a way to reach me. And the way he reached me was first that he had more faith in me than I had in myself. One of the common things he would tell us is, I can't wait to see the great things you're going to do with your life. And I'm like, are you talking to me? And he's like, yeah, God has gifted you. You're gifted. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And he says, I'll beg to differ. He started to see in me things and hope for me, in things for me that I never would have imagined myself. And it goes back to this understanding, God loves you first. And sometimes God needs us to love the person first. So I love to work with the most, quote, difficult students, because that's what I was. And just love them first. And I'm telling you that the gift that is, do this. Love the persons, the most difficult peoples in your life. Love them first. And see what happens, right? That's what he talked to us about. And out of this love, the next step was admiration.
this guy, oh, if you like me, then I'm going to like you. And I started to see him and admire him. And he would not take my admiration. He wouldn't take it. And he would always point to the cross and say, what you want is Jesus Christ. I can feel you're searching for this. That's what will quench your thirst. And so he taught me how to pray. And we just prayed it. He gave me a rosary. And he taught me, not this one, but he taught me how to pray. And I found a peace and the grace through this little prayer that you just shared with us that started to quench the thirst. And that's, and then the Eucharist and confession and the life in the church ended up bringing me to what I'm doing today.
The most used phrase in the Bible, 365 times, is not love your God. It's not love your neighbor. It's be not afraid. And that was his favorite phrase. That's how he spoke to the world the first, when they first became the Pope. You heard that thousands of times in 50, 60 languages, talk about why he was so adamant about being not afraid.
I think, so first of all, we talked a little bit earlier about Poland and what a marvelous but mistreated nation that was over the last 100 years, 200 years. That was just, it's a wonderful people with a beautiful culture, and they have just got the short end of the stick in terms of the history. And he has been a part of this, if you look at his life, of being chased one way out of the city by the Germans and then chased the other way by the Russians, and just this is something that historically happened. And he ended up realizing that our actual understanding is not what's happening to us, but how we react to it, right? It's a bit like Viktor Frankl and many other people, Father Zizek, that we read about. I think John Paul was one of these people who realized that. And what he wanted to do is that you become a victim when you're afraid. As long as you are not afraid, you're not a victim because you are in charge of the situation, no matter what happens. And he wanted to say, be not afraid. That be not afraid does two things. It gives us self-confidence of who we are. We are sons and daughters of God. Kingly heritage, no matter where we find ourselves or how people are treating us. And we are not afraid because he believed very strongly in the God of history, right? No matter what happens, our God is a God of history that is involved, not an absent God that doesn't mind what's happening, but is in the midst of it and makes flowers grow on manure. Yeah? Be not afraid, no matter what happens. That's the end of this. So one of his favorite theologian, which is I'm proud of him because he's from my town. His name is Hans Urs von Balthasar. He has a saying about being a Christian where he says, well, as a Christian, talking about history and the future is an interesting exercise, but it's a little bit like reading a suspense novel having read the last page first. Right? That's who we are. So be not afraid. You know how this is going to end.
Aka shot him point blank one day. Did the Pope ever meet, other than that day, Aka?
Yes. So, my sergeant, Giovanni, is the guy who caught Alyosha. We called him the Christmas tree because he had so many medals that he clinked when he walked, right? Only in the military you make jokes of things like this. But anyway, there's a truth to it, no? And so Giovanni caught him and basically arrested him. He actually refused. People don't know him publicly, my friend Giovanni, because he in a way wanted to refuse accolades because he says, this idiot shot the Pope in the midst of 30 nuns. And then he tried to get away. So when I got there, I just saved his life because they were like bags. You can imagine.
And so he says, oh, actually, this guy owes me something. So he grabbed him and arrested him, and eventually, I told you earlier that there's a technicality. John Paul actually, from the beginning, said, I want to forgive this man, just let him go. And because the Vatican is its own state, the Pope is the supreme leader of that state and actually can do this, can give clemency. Pope Benedict gave somebody clemency a while ago. So he wanted to do that too, but there was a glitch. St. Peter's Square doesn't belong to the Vatican. The Vatican starts at the front of the basilica. It's a long story with Mussolini and the Pope saying, no, I don't want your gift. So he shot him on Italian soil. And so the Italians claimed him and came and picked him out of this Vatican prison and took him with them. And they put him on trial. And then he says, no, let him go. And he says, no, the Italians tried him anyway and put him in prison. And then John Paul decided to go and make a public statement of it. And he would go visit him in prison. And I don't know what he said, but they had a long conversation with each other and embraced each other. The Pope gave him a gift and said officially, I forgive you. And then Akça's mother was there. And Ali Akça's mother, they're Turkish, and so on the way out, the Pope said, and the mother lives, of course, in Turkey, and he said to the woman, look, whenever you come and visit your son, you come and visit me too. And so I knew Ali Akça's mom because she would come to dinner with the Pope whenever she was in Rome, because he felt that she's losing her son, and he wanted to give her strength.
Speaking of special women, did you ever meet Saint Mother Teresa?
Yeah, several times. She's a piece of work. One day, so she would come in the beginning, I don't know who that is. And in the beginning, we were like Buddy and I were not letting her in because she's like, I'm going to see the Pope. And we're like, yeah, sure you do. If you don't know her, right? And then the sisters come and other people come, don't you know this is Mother Teresa? And she's, oh, okay. I guess you can pass after all. So she walks around with the Pope and she says to John Paul, listen, it's a real shame, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself because this is a whole city, Vatican City, and you don't have a homeless shelter. And he's like, oops. It's like turning to the guy next to him, we don't have a homeless shelter? And she's like, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, and you need to fix it. And John Paul turns to her and says, you will fix it. And so they started a homeless shelter in the Vatican, right next to the CDF, on the side of the square. And then, of course, there was the concern about violence and this and that, and of course, the commander, member of the household, is always there, and he's like, oh, and my guards would love to volunteer their free time to help serve and make sure the sisters are safe. So I spent a lot of my free time in the soup kitchen of Mother Teresa too, and there was no real issue with violence or anything, but they could use us as washing pots and stuff anyway.
A little plug.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Mother Cabrini, she stands up to the Pope, the Archbishop of New York City, the mayor. She's like a Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Great movie. Okay. You were profoundly influenced by his theology of the body. That was huge for
Yeah.
him. Okay, and then I quote you. You now use that to teach business.
Yeah.
Theology of the body. How do the two even connect?
That's my shtick. Years ago, I used to run a consulting firm, as I told you. It was called OTF. It was like Monitor Group's, Harvard Business School's consulting firm, like a subsidiary, and we did business strategy. And we actually had an office in Rwanda. We have friends from Kenya here, right? And so it was in Rwanda, and our specialty was business strategy in uncertain environments, which is, I'm a software guy, and I've always built software companies, and so that's something I know well, but I just didn't think you could apply it to emerging markets. And so we would go to Rwanda and help the Rwandan private sector to think of ways you rebuild the economy after a genocide.
right? And we work with them in strategy and everything, and then they come up. It's not like we go there and tell them. They come up with the ideas, and we just help them to think through the strategies, through the steps. And they figured out that they could create, during the war, during the genocide, all the guerrillas went from Uganda over to Rwanda because they wouldn't be poached there. You know, and that's where the Gorillas in the Mist, you know, with Jane Fossey and everything. That's what this was. And they have like 20 of these tribes of gorillas. I think they call them pods, but I don't know. And so they built a whole eco-friendly, sustainable tourism there in Rwanda and this. And then, of course, the whole thing is working and everything. And they keep saying, well, your CEO, me, over in the US, has never come to actually take part of you can go visit these gorillas in the wild. These are wild gorillas. And I'm like, look, it's okay. I'm 6'9", and there's like a 3-hour Jeep ride in it and hit my head, and they don't have a bed for me and everything. I'm good. No, I have to go. So I went. And make a long story short, you walk up for like 4 hours in the middle of the night until in the morning you get up there and you meet this family of gorillas. It takes your breath away. There is one silverback gorilla and about 30 of the family, females, young ones, and they are it's so quiet and peaceful. They eat this mountain celery, they call it, and they just sit there, and and the sun comes up, and it's a rainforest, but it's steep territory. It's like on a mountain, and I go up there with this group of the people who organized the whole thing, and we got in between the silverback and one of the females. And he don't like that. He looks at us, and this is me with 12 of my Rwandan friends. That gorilla looks at us and says, "You are the problem," and starts to charge at me, coming down, screaming. I'm like, this is the end of my life. They tear me to the ground and make this sound or whatever. This gorilla, let me explain. A silverback gorilla is like 800 pounds and 7 feet tall, right? He halts right in front of me. He was so close to me, I could breathe. I could smell his breath, like the celery breath. But they calmed him down, and he lost interest and walked away again. And as soon as that happened, the guy goes to me, "Hey, Widmer, how do you meet your cousin?" I'm like, "Dude, that's not my cousin. That's offensive." And he says, "Well, it's 98.9% your DNA. If you take him apart and you apart, there's a little more of him, but essentially you're the same. You know, a little more hair, him, a muscle." And the whole walk down, I argued with this guy of why I am not like a silverback. And eventually, I told him, "Look, this silverback has been sitting on this mountain, eating his darn celery for the last 20 generations, as far back as it goes. Let me tell you something. My grandpa, I read my grandpa's letter to us grandchildren, and he wrote to us how he remembered seeing the first car, how he experienced air conditioning for the first time, and how he went into an airplane for the first time. All things that 3 generations before me did not exist were created since then." And I said, "I came on a plane, and I stayed in a hotel with air conditioning, and I drove here. That's all. My people have created this. This guy never created a thing in his world, in his life. He never worked a day in his life." To that, he didn't know what to say. And then I contemplated this. Think about it. If work that we do, he doesn't work. If work would be a physical, biological thing, he should know how to work, because we're actually the same. And it gives the answer of why this happened and why I can work and he can't. You know why? Because I am created in the image and likeness of the Creator, and he's not. Now, if you go back to Genesis and look at this, it shows you how this is. Because when you take me apart and him apart, you have the same. Think back to Genesis, and when God created animals, how does he create them?
He goes down, he grabs clay, and he forms them, and every shape and form and color you can think of, and off they go, and he creates them and lets them, roam the world. And then at the end, he says, there's nobody like me here. Nobody a subject, somebody who's like me, who acts. How does he create us? He goes down again and creates and uses the same clay as he used to create the animals, with one difference. What is it? At the end, before he lets us go, he breathes his spirit into us, the Creator's spirit into us, and says, now go. And he gives us a mandate. And he says, now you are like me. A, you will never die. These animals, they will die. B, you are a creator. I let you participate in my creative power. I have brought this paradise, this world, this far. You're in charge now. Continue creation, and we'll call that work. By the way, the first verb we know in the Bible about God is what? Work. He's a creator. God makes stuff. So do you. There's not an aspect. God calls this work, and he gives us the stewardship mandate, not just to steer this without any bumps, but we're supposed to continue to develop the world, to not finish, but to continue participating in his creativity. The next part of it that he says, and you're like me in that you have free will. God allowed us to decide for ourselves. Now, God needed this because if God has us creatures and he wants us to love him, he needs to give us freedom or it's not going to happen, right? Unless you have freedom, it's not love, right? That gave us this opportunity to decide between good and bad, because we get to decide whether we do this or that. That's subject. We're a subject. We can actually act on other things. An animal can't do evil because it has no choice, right? The dog has to eat the steak when it falls, and when you don't pay attention, it's not evil. Like, it can't do evil. We can, and what we have been tasked with in our work by the Lord is to say, imitate me when you work. What did God do every evening after he created something cool? You know what he said? No, attaboy. Right? He's like, and he saw that it was good. Now let me ask you something. The goods that you created today, are they truly good? The services you provided today, did they truly serve? This is you as a subject. You get to decide. Eventually, you're going to have to answer for that. But you have the freedom in your work to create goods that are truly good and provide services that truly serve, because you act in the image and likeness of God. God has given you this freedom, and we can create goods that are not good and provide services that do not serve, quite the opposite. But this is part of our calling to imitate God. If we imitate God properly, guess what? We become more like him. What do we call that? We become holy. Work is an integral part of your becoming holy. I'm not distinguishing between, paid work, and Michelle and her mom just took care of her dad before he passed to the Lord. God rest his soul. And they did this for other return other than money. Money is just one transfer value that we have, but that's work, right? And that's a service that truly serves, right? That's what we have. That's what we do when we imitate God, that we can say at the end of the day, and this is a truly good thing. When we imitate God, we become more like him, and therefore your work is a path to holiness. That, in a sense, I just gave you the entire theology of the body in a nutshell. It was a little more than a nutshell, of how to apply what he sees us as having this creative power, which to me, once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it, that we created work. Now,
okay.
Sorry, Jack.
Couple
this
minutes.
Is my thing.
I know, you're doing great. You're doing great. A couple minutes ago, you said, let me ask you a question. So, Andreas, let me ask you a question. Okay. All right, let's go back to April 8th, 2005. Tell us about that day, April 8th, 2005.
Does anybody know what happened on April 8th? No? No, he died in 04. Huh? No, 05 you said. That's, yeah, he did die, but on April, he died on April 2nd. His funeral. You get the point anyway.
Two cupcakes.
Yeah, two cupcakes. Yeah, I hear they're really good. Yeah, that was the funeral. You know, we actually, I don't know, I'm going to tell you this story because I want you to pay attention to providence in your life. John Paul talked about that if we just open our eyes, God, this is the God of history, and I want you to look at your life, and I'm just going to share this with you from my side. God is good, and God is, I feel God all around me, like with you and I knowing each other and all the things we've done together already, and that God is all around, and if you pay attention, you see this. It's like what, didn't you tell me today that this brother says, thank God before?
Yeah, Father Solanus Casey every morning will say, thank God ahead of time. Right?
Yeah, because he's so good. So it was a time we had lots of issues. We're adoptive parents, Michelle and I, and we had some issues, and it was really tough at home because of 10 different reasons. And I ran this company, OTF Group, and we also had an office in Afghanistan, in Kabul. And there the local government, Hamid Karzai was our customer and so on. And of course, right then we had this little baby that we just adopted, and I didn't travel yet. The contract came to an end, and they're like, where's the CEO of your company? And I'm like, yeah, sorry, I can't really travel right now. And they're like, look, either this guy gets here or no new contract. It's reasonable, right? So my board goes, you better get your butt over there, or this is not, this is going to be really bad. And I'm like, okay. And so it took me a while to figure out how to organize everything, that everything would be well at home. And Michelle's mom came and took care of the baby. And finally, I'm like, on that day, I go, and it was so crazy. I didn't look at the news or anything. That day, I get into a plane on Saturday morning, and flew to London, and then from London to Abu Dhabi, and Abu Dhabi into Kabul was the plan. And it was April 2nd, and the minute I landed in London, I get out of the airplane, I see on CNN, everything has the Vatican on there, and it says John Paul just died. I'm like, okay, I can read God's message if he hits me like that, I'll get it. I'm like, I'm here, I'm in Europe the night that my guide, that my hero dies. I'm not here because I'm going to Afghanistan. I'm here because I'm going to Rome, because if he would have died, I couldn't have just flown and say, hey, the Pope died, I'm going to go to Europe. But here I am, actually, everything is taken care of from home. I land there, and he died. And I changed my flight, and this is one of the reasons, within 24 hours, because, the Swiss Guards are a fraternity, I was in front of his mortal remains within 24 hours after he died, and was able to pay my respects as they prepared him to lay in state. And it was just the most, there is such blatant grace from the Lord to allow me to be there. I was in tears. And there's a million people outside, and I'm there, and I'm like, this is one of the few times I actually almost audibly discerned God's voice. There were maybe 5 people in the room with him lying there, and I'm like, I knew it was difficult to get in even, and then I'm there, and I'm like, I always cry. Cry is the Holy Spirit to me. It's like the tears, these tears, let them out. They're from the Holy Spirit. That's what he does, because it takes all of our pretense away. You cry when you let go. Just let go. Right? I'm like crying, and I kept saying, why me, why me, why me? Again, I'm nobody. I come from this, godforsaken village, and I'm like, why me, why me? And eventually I heard, you're welcome. Literally, you're welcome. I'm like, oh, thank you. And then he says, so what are you going to do with it? So I gave you this gift. You knew the man of the century.
Does anybody at your work know? You know what the truth is? No. They didn't know who I was. As a matter of fact, and so he says, what are you going to do with it? You're going to just put it, we'd go there on Michelle's 30th birthday. We went, and we had an audience, and he blessed Shelley. When my Mexican mother-in-law and my father-in-law came to Europe, we went, and I introduced them to the Pope. I mean, this is all, I used it when I could, but then when it goes to working and everything, I was not the Jesus guy or the JP2 guy, and I completely separated the two things. Most people did not know this about me. And here I am, and he says, what are you going to do about it? And I knew what he meant. And I said, Lord, nobody will ever meet me again without knowing about you and what you have done in my life. And I left, and I went to the funeral, and there's a whole other story about this. On the funeral, I said, I'm here as a pilgrim. Pay attention to the little things in your life. I'm here as a pilgrim. There's 4 or 5 million people there. And I'm like, the guards say, do you want to have an up front seat up there? You can come with us and you can be there. No. I come here as a pilgrim to pay homage to my hero. And I basically just got up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. By that time, people slept on the floor outside. You couldn't walk over people. And I just, there's a square to the left of St. Peter's, Piazza Risorgimento, and I was there, and that's where it stopped. Like, you couldn't move anymore. And I'm like, that's fine. Even if I hear the whole thing and I'm a square away, I'm here, I will fervently pray, and I'm here to pay my homage to this great inspiration and leader of mine. Suddenly, you don't see anything. The food ran out in the restaurants, like the bar was everything was sold out, and people started to share with each other. It was an amazing, amazing experience I've never had in my life before. Suddenly, like a river, it starts to move. And you can't go against it because, when it's like in a stadium, when the crowd moves like this, that's where you're going. So I have no control of where I'm going. I knew the people now by then around me, and it moved and it stopped exactly halfway from the obelisk to the front of the church, and I'm telling you, where I stood, John Paul's casket was right in front of me, all the way up there, like halfway to the obelisk, but it was right. I stood still. The flow stopped right when I'm in front of the casket. And I'm like, okay, Lord, this is I guess this is where you want me to be. And it was an amazing spiritual experience to be there. Eventually, by the way, I wanted to fly on, but I lost my security clearance, so they made me go back to the US. And I got back to the US, and all hell broke loose, and they fired me. They said, where did you go? I'm like, I went to the Pope's funeral. And they're like, instead of saving our company, you go to the Pope's funeral? It's like, who the heck are you? And I'm like, yeah, well, that's who I am from now on. And I lost that job. Yeah.
All right, one more question about, can you compare the last 3 papacies? And then we'll go to the next topic.
Yeah. We're Catholic. The Pope is not Superman. But the Pope, for some reason, is chosen by the Lord. And he teaches faith and morals, and he is first among equals. John Paul broke a lot with tradition when he became Pope, and became a very different kind of Pope. He would start to jet around the world and everything. And he had an active influence on politics, on world affairs and everything. A lot of that is very, very new. A lot of people see this today with Francis doing. Actually, John Paul did a lot of this stuff where people go, maybe you shouldn't do this or so. It's not clear that that's what a Pope ought to do, or a normal Pope does. And really upset the apple cart a bit and became a celebrity Pope, right? A celebrity Pope. And then Benedict follows, who seems to me to be, and this celebrity Pope basically came and talked about human dignity. And his message was one of
I think what he did is he had a breakthrough. John Paul's greatest contribution, in my opinion, is a breakthrough ever since René Descartes and the Protestant Reformation. We have not found a way to connect our actions with our faith, right? So I think, therefore I am. Basically says the body doesn't matter, right? So this is all an imagination. In the Protestant work ethic, that what I do, it's faith only, and what I do doesn't really matter that much. And there's a break between the soul and the body. There's a break in what you do as a human. That is the challenge of modernity, right? That we have the thought and we have the reality and our bodies, and so my body doesn't really mean anything. They went back to this idea that the soul is a prisoner inside the body, and that's of course not what the Catholic Church teaches. John Paul II, with his theology of the body, has broken that and has given René Descartes an answer, a definitive answer about, I think, therefore I am, to talk about the corporal reality of the human person, and that's why we call it the theology of the body. I think that's what he did, and with that, talked about human dignity. I mean, what the Soviet Union and many other totalitarian states do is to diminish the human dignity, to violate human dignity to that point, and that's what John Paul was all about, human dignity, right? And so I think he brought that in and he's a great theologian, great philosopher, and broke ground for this, that I believe he inspired so many people that we have entire seminaries, entire rooms full of JP2 generation. My prediction is that the greatest impact of John Paul II hasn't happened yet. We're a ticking time bomb, because all the bishops all the priests who are of the JP2 generation, all the people who are of the JP2 generation, these are people from the late 70s, 80s, 90s. Those people are not in charge, but they will be. And when they are, you're going to see the effects. That's the true springtime that John Paul is bringing about. Benedict has solidified this. It's interesting with Benedict. So I knew him, and he often would wait in the little room, and he would always meet John Paul on Fridays and many times for dinner on that day, and he would wait with me in that room when I'm there, because I would hear when they're saying, okay, he's ready, and then they let him in. But so I've had many discussions with him. He was God love him. He's a beautiful, timid introvert, and with a heart as big as this room. They talked him the Panzer Cardinal. And when I heard this, I was like, that's such a silly thing to say. This man has a compassion and a heart and a mind that is so gentle and so beautiful. What he did when he became Pope is the only thing that he could do with his personality. And he turned around, and this is what he did with me as well. He was there as I had this whole conversion. The first thing Benedict does is to say, I need to hurry up. I want to reintroduce you guys to Jesus Christ. The first thing he becomes when he becomes Pope, he says, I want to reintroduce you to Jesus Christ. And so then he does 3 encyclicals on God is love, and 3 encyclicals on God, and he writes a biography, a theological, spiritual biography of Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, let me just get this done, because who knows how long I'm going to live, and I really need to tell you about Jesus Christ. That's what he did. And he went back to get rid of some of this abstract thinking about Christ, of reasoning your way into a theory about it, and meet the man again. Jesus Christ, who came to die, as you so beautifully said, to die on this cross, and carried this cross, and his mother cried for him. Don't give me any theory about that. I can feel it right here. It's enough, right? That God who gives his only son, that's what Benedict came to say. And now you have Francis. And Francis, in my opinion, is a prophet. I think Francis is a prophet inside the church, who says some things to us that we need to hear but don't want to hear. It is very dangerous for us as Christians in general to become somewhat pharisaical. That we somehow say,
there's a strong mimetic feeling in the churches. When everybody starts to do it this way, then everybody does it that way too. Everybody goes like this again, so everybody does that. And when do you kneel, and when do you stand? Well, how do you say the rosary, and this and that? And there is kind of an understanding in the room often of being with the crowd or not. And it becomes, there's fashions in our faith and everything, and there shouldn't be. There should be only one fashion, and it's the Lord's mercy and the Lord's open arms. The Lord doesn't go like this, it goes like this, right? And I think what Francis is doing is to make the church a welcoming place and to remind us, like a prophet does, that we are here to welcome the stranger and welcome others into our midst and to celebrate that. I think that's what a prophet does. Prophets are not comfortable, and he's not comfortable.
You talk a lot.
Yeah. I told you.
No.
Jack, you invited me here.
You talk a lot about the gospel of work.
Oh.
What do you mean the gospel? Is that the fifth gospel, the eighth gospel? Whoa. What gospel of work?
Part of it is a play of work, a play of words. It's a play of words because John Paul wrote the Gospel of Life, right? And in it is the theology of the body, and I basically play with that and say the Gospel of work. I can tell you, in me traveling a lot now, going around, and I've taught over the last 10 years, like 1,500 students that are 18 years old or so and going to the workforce. There's a lot of meaninglessness in our society about the work we do. The work has become as if we work today as if work was invented after the fall. But that's not true. Work has become harder after the fall. But the true gospel of work is that through work we participate in God's creativity. And that is a privilege and that is a joy. One of the things that John Paul would point out is, he would always say this, when we work right, we don't just make more, we become more. And think back of what I talked about, of what work really is. When you conform your work to God's creativity, it's as simple as the person who set these chairs here today. God bless them. They set these chairs, and it's what he called an objective and a subjective meaning of work. Objectively, you basically put these chairs here. Subjectively, which is what we can bring to work because we are godly, is to say, I'm setting this up so everybody can see well, and that they're having a really great understanding and time and a coming together of minds tonight, and that's the person who set this up. That's what they meant, right? That is the gospel of work. That when you work, you can make it more. You can make a dinner for somebody and do it to strengthen them, to give good to them, to be good to them, to make their next day or make the time that they spend at your table a welcoming experience. You see, that's the subjective that we're putting into the work. And we have lost that today. Today, our work has become utilitarian, means to an end. The only thing that counts is outcome, be it on one side or the other. On the one side, it's Friedman who says the only responsibility of business is to create shareholder return. Well, what about the people who actually do the work? And the other side says, CSR, you need to make sure that other people, after you make a profit, you give back. Well, what about making the profit in the first place? We need a theory and a practice of work that focuses on work itself, which is the imitation of God. But every theory that we have today in the world ignores that. And that's what the gospel of work addresses.
America's greatest natural resource is our young people. Yogi Berra used to say, the future ain't what it used to be. Okay? The future is our young people.
Yeah.
You work with these Gen Zers, you teach them every day. What do they really want and need?
They're as a majority much better than I was, because they are seeking meaning clearly, whereas I didn't. I just wanted to be cool, right? And I'm telling you, so I'm a kid from the 70s, and early 80s, and these kids, they're looking for meaning much quicker, and just having a result and just having a lot of money isn't what's going to do it for them. They're actually looking for meaning, and they're entirely thirsty for meaning. It's just that we need to be there then to guide them in this. They're starting to balk at the idea of having a career, which I entered in seamlessly and without complaints to say, hey, if you let me participate in something, I'll try to, go up the corporate ladder and everything. That's not what, they're not into that. They actually say, no, I want to know what this company stands for and why we're doing this and everything. Now, you can criticize that, but my approach is always, let me work with them. What they're saying comes from a good place. It's, again, love first. See what they're saying and which is actually a good intention to say, yeah, I'm not getting up in the morning. I don't want my company. I want to make goods that are truly good, services that truly serve. Let me work with you to crystallize that out. I start a business with every student in my class. So I've started 1,500 businesses with my freshmen. When they start, that's when you come to Catholic and you're a freshman business student, it doesn't matter what you start a business with me. That's like the auditorium deal that we're doing. And I have been able to show so many of the students how this works. Business is an easy thing to do. My favorite business question is, how may I help you? Don't you love it when you walk into a store and somebody says, how may I help you? And it has everything in it. Business by definition. We're going way too complicated with economics and everything. Look, business is very simple, very simple. How may I help you? If I create value for you, if I give you a solution that is worth more to you than it costs me to provide it, that's called a business. And the money that is extra, what do we call that? I don't like the word profit anymore because they used it up, they gave it a bad name. I call it new money because it is new money. It's new creation of value. And so all I need to know is, how may I help you? What talents has God given me that I can create value for you and be other directed in actually solving the problems for you? And if we start to look at business like this, it looks completely different than before. And I've never had a student, in 1,500 students, I've never had a student who didn't come up with, I helped them figure out what is your talent and how do you create value for others with that talent. And then the rest of the 4 years of business school are for you to learn the skills to create value with your talents, because the talent is something you already have.
Speaking of helping, you often say that sometimes helping hurts.
Yeah.
In connection with our approach to poverty.
Yeah.
Don't you have a soul? A heart?
I know, I don't. I've done a lot of, because of my work with OTF, so I've done a lot of work in Africa, South America, and in a lot of emerging markets, the Southern Hemisphere. And afterwards, I had a philanthropy, a foundation that did enterprise solutions to poverty. I would go around and find the best entrepreneurs in these countries I could find and give them like an investment grant. And I'm telling you what I saw, and it took me a while to figure out the difference. What I saw is that we're missing a difference between two things. The aid and the help we usually give is in 90% of the cases better for us than for the person who receives it. Hear me out. We are wired in a way God made us in a way to have our heart that when we see somebody suffer, that we want to do something about it. And that is good. It's like the Good Samaritan, right? And that's a parable that Jesus taught, that there's nobody who says this is not okay. As a matter of fact, we say the Samaritan's purse and the Samaritan hospital and this and that. And this is what we do as the community. It's the human non-negotiable to go and help. But I just want you to think about what this parable actually says. This was a man who was beaten up, and he was helped by this person going by, and that person took him to the hospital, or the hostel, and took care of him and for him to heal. And then when he left, he told the innkeeper, what? Keep him here. Here's a trust fund, and he can stay here and give him a nice suite, or what did he say? Care for him until what? Until he gets better. And then? Yeah, and then he goes. See, when we look at the Good Samaritan, we think about this the wrong way. Charity
is something that happens for a humanitarian crisis. The definition of a crisis is that it is a temporary thing. This man, that was temporary. Either he was going to die or he was going to survive. But within a few hours or a few days, this is a crisis the man was in. This was not his lifestyle, right? It was a crisis. So the Samaritan approach needs to be used in a crisis. The heart, use it, a heart for the poor when there's a crisis. Right now in Haiti, they need the crisis because all hell is breaking loose down there. But the mistake that we're making after the parable of the Good Samaritan, what's another parable that he talks about? The parable of the talents. And I use the word talent. My talents and how I create value for others with this talent is the interest and the profit that the Lord seeks. And we have to go back and show that. And that's work. That's how we go about our daily living and our daily work. This is one of the reasons that if we don't use our talents to work with, we actually are not completely flourishing as human beings. This is why the church teaches that there is a right to work. Because there is, what's the opposite? What's implied, and Paul says it much directer than the church says it. Paul says, you don't work, you don't eat, right? That was before the correctness of not hurting anybody's feelings. Now we're saying he has a right to work, but I mean, that's just the other side of the coin. Yeah? When we don't work, we don't become more. You know what John Paul said? When you work, you don't just work, you become more. What we need to see is that when you deal with somebody who's it's a lifestyle, it's a situation that is an ongoing situation, not a crisis, an ongoing situation, then you need a mind for the poor. And we need a mind for the poor. You need to give them a solution that is sustainable. One of the biggest lies out there in the world is that there is a fixed amount of money in the world. You all know that's not true. When I create value, there's more. As long as we're in a free market and somebody sells something for more than it costs them freely, there's more money. That they have to print more and more money. There is not a second in the world, but there's only a certain amount of money. Money is maybe the only unlimited resource we have because we make money. So if you want to help the poor, John Paul would say it's demeaning to say you live on $1.20 a day and therefore you're poor. He says that's non-dignified. And so the UN asked him, okay, if that's a bad way to measure poverty, give me a better one. And that's where the philosopher comes out in him. And he says you should spend 80% of the time defining the problem and 20%, then you only need 20% to solve it. And he gave you, it's one of the smartest things on the economic side that he ever said. He defined poverty when they asked him, when he said money was not a good way to measure it. He said to be poor is to be excluded from networks of productivity and exchange. Let me say it again because this is a mouthful. To be poor is to be excluded from networks of productivity and exchange. Well, what's a network of productivity? What's a network of exchange? See, this is an actionable problem statement. So if I bring somebody into a banking system, into a community where they know people and can do business with, into the internet, give them a network of productivity, of learning, a learning network where they can become more productive in what they're doing. Now you're solving poverty because you're helping people help themselves. You actually help them to get a job and to realize themselves, to fully flourish. He got a lot of criticism for that, but I found in my work that that's the approach I'm taking. It's easy to have a heart for the poor. The difficult part is to have a mind for the poor.
Would you take some questions?
No, absolutely not.
Before we do, we got to do some housekeeping. So first, thanks a million for coming, sharing a lot of great ideas, concepts with us.
Thank you. You're doing God's work. I really appreciate and admire what you're doing. Steady and always there. It's one of my favorite things to be interviewed by you and be on your show, and I really wish you well. Thank you for what you do.
Keep talking.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
He's the best. I love you, mate.
We can joke. I love that we can joke.
Yeah.
People say, Jack, what's it like when you have a guest who's a politician?
Yeah.
This is what the show is like when you have a guest who's a politician. Okay, all right. Cost a lot of money to put these together. And so, if you will, we'd like to take a free will contribution while I tell you about our sponsors as well. Ave Maria Mutual Funds, designed for serious long-term investors who want to invest in accordance with their pro-life Catholic beliefs. The moral criteria of the group of 6 no-load mutual funds are overseen by the distinguished and independent Catholic Advisory Board. Ave Maria Mutual Funds. Ave Maria Radio. El Cresta, Teresa Tamio, Vanessa, is a beacon of hope and inspiration. Can be heard on 990 AM, 105.5 FM, 107.9 FM. Together, we can build the church and bless the nation. Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services of the Archdiocese of Detroit is a charitable organization founded in faith and dedicated to providing education, support, and professional services. Its mission is to provide guidance and wisdom on end-of-life services. Chicken Shack. Founded in 1956 by John and Iola Sobek. You met them once.
Yep.
Okay? We're the beneficiaries of the best roasted chicken in America ever since. We lost John a few years ago, but Iola is 96 years old.
Wow.
The matriarch, when she's in town, she goes to work every day. Okay? And she says, we're more than just a restaurant or food. We're family, mine and yours, and community with our 200 plus employees and 23 stores. She wanted to meet you again and give you some roasted chicken, but she's in Florida as we speak. So, corporate travel. Since 1965, you and Shelley have done a lot together. They've served the educational, faith, music, cultural, and leisure travel markets with best-in-class tours, events, and programming. Their mission is to enhance lives and promote culture by creating customized travel experiences that open the world to their clients.
If you ever have a chance to go to Rome with them, they have very special access to the Swiss Guards.
Yes.
They're very
And
good
other
to the
places.
Swiss- yeah.
And other places.
But they're very good to the Swiss Guards. They're great people.
Father Robert E. Burke Memorial Trust Foundation. Father Burke was the longtime pastor of Holy Name Parish in Birmingham. Beautiful man. Before he passed away in 2003, he put in place a foundation for the purposes of funding continuing adult education and evangelization. The foundation prays that their leadership and example will lead us all as a community to deeper faith and witness. Lastly, Pro-Life Partners Foundation helps pro-life organizations, schools, and communities protect preborn children, end abortion, and heal the nation. It exists to be the wind beneath the wings of the pro-life movement. Their mission is to end abortion and to advance a culture of life from conception to natural death. Russell Sumner Blue World Production is the audio visual. St. John's Resort treats us like royalty. And within a couple days, this speech, along with the others since August, will be on the AIP Speaker Series, a YouTube channel. So you can have any of your friends listen to it, and AIP Speaker Series. So what if I take the microphone and go through the crowd and we'll take some questions?
I stay here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir?
Good evening, Professor Widmer.
Hi.
Could you talk a little bit about, I'm in the investment business, and we met before.
Yeah, you were a student at CUA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk
Polo player.
Yes.
I know you.
Well, talk a little bit about, in the investment world, one of the things I've heard from a few Catholics and other Christians is they're concerned about the separation of your earnings from the work you've done because you're giving money and then you're receiving more money than you give without necessarily doing any work. So I just want to talk about, the philosophy of investing, ethically and how that fits in with work, and also maybe, as an investor, especially I'm thinking in private placement type things where you're really getting something new off the ground and have some direct influence with the entrepreneurs, how to do that ethically and then and how to really be a good investor from a moral standpoint.
So in terms of investing, I'm not a super investor or anything. We were always so highly exposed with our startups that we were in that I never really became a super investor because my whole life was in the startups I was in. And so that's not a huge expertise of mine. But I'd like to leave you with this thought of what we ought to do as Catholic Christians. That's again with the subjectivity of our lives, meaning, I don't mean relativity, I mean being subjects. There's this thing called Catholic social teaching that tells you, people often look at it, in my opinion, the wrong way, that they expect this to be like the 10 Commandments, but it's not. The 10 Commandments is do this, don't do that, very, very straightforward, like 101. Catholic social teaching is not like that. Catholic social teaching is a mental model. It's a mindset of saying, think about it in these terms or in those terms. So Catholic social teaching is almost like the glasses you're wearing when you're an investor and saying, okay, is this concept of subsidiarity versus solidarity, or the preferential option for the poor, or justice and social justice and things like that. And the definitive point is that you get to decide. But it's a responsibility, right? But you get to decide, okay, with your investments, what's your lens in how you address justice and preferential option for the poor and all of these things if you look at your whole portfolio. And I like that because it allows for subsidiarity. It allows for you to be innovative in how, and I think you're working on some of these ideas, to be innovative in how do you create a just investment portfolio, to create a moral investment portfolio, and all that is always including you as the person who decides, because that is one of our key roles here on earth as Christians.
Any questions?
I'll throw one out there. As I've been working from home over the last 4 years after COVID, I think it's an interesting challenge that we've run into with previously there was sort of a physical separation between work and the rest of my life. And with working from home, now we have to navigate this. Should there be a separation? Should I somehow be able to integrate my work with the rest of my life? And what is it that the Gospel of Work and kind of your approach has to say to really building an integrated lifestyle?
Thanks, Rebecca. So the first two questions came from people I know very well. Rebecca is the editor over at OSV Books and is just an absolutely talented young woman who writes well and publishes great books. As a matter of fact, she's publishing Michelle's book this summer that that story I talked about, the Christmas. Shelley wrote a Christmas book called The Too Tall Swiss Guard. And it's a story it's a book that teaches virtue to children through the visually beautiful Swiss guards and the Vatican and the Pope and everything, and beautiful stories. And she is going to show like individuality of what God has given you and how you work with this, like me with size. And Rebecca has been helping in making this happen. Thank you. So in terms of work and life balance, I would love to invite you. I have I made a video series over COVID for lack of doing it's nothing else to do, right? So we made a video series called The Gospel of Work. It's free. You can go to siocascenter.com, or if you just Google The Gospel of Work. If you're on Formed and Array of Hope and all that, it's on there as well. And in there, there's a whole series. There's one video there a bit about work-life balance. And I find that work-life balance doesn't work on a daily balance, on a daily scale or on a weekly scale. Shelley and I, we look at years, sometimes even decades. to create this balance. It's just not realistic that when you're building a company that you're going to have this perfect balance, and you're just going to drive yourself crazy trying to do something that is physically impossible. Just like when you have a newborn, to think that, like we had the newborn, and I wouldn't travel for my company, and I worked from home, and I had to neglect my job as a CEO because we had a newborn. It's just not realistic to think that you're going to put in a long work week if you have a newborn with you, right? And so I would just like to ask you to expand your view of what balance what and in what time frame, right? There is times your business is cyclical, your books come out in June, so probably the time right now where you're racing to get everybody to submit everything is not the best time for the balance. But then maybe in August you can say, okay, and I will actually be totally offline. I want you to think in those terms. Please watch The Gospel of Work. There's a lot of practical stuff in there.
Andreas, if I may ask, it seems like currently there's a real trend for low cost. Everybody wants low cost value, and as everybody knows, everything's made in China today, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, from a theological perspective, where is the line drawn to where you're not placing value above all else?
Yeah. So that's the issue of the consumer society where we just buy and buy and buy and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. I think what you're seeing, so I'm a glass half full person, right? I'm a total entrepreneur, small startup guy. I've never seen an opportunity I don't like. But when I'm looking at the world, I see the segmentation of the markets. It's starting to be a saturation with cheap crap in a way, coming from China. And there's a saturation with this. We're starting to have a desire for quality, a desire for I guarantee you in your neighborhood there is a farm to table movement where you can get crates with actual stuff that's grown within 10 miles of your house, right? There are artisans again on Etsy where you can actually buy something where somebody did this from hand even though you could make it with a machine. I actually believe that this is a growing trend. Just like right now, I give you just an example. Whenever the pendulum swings this way, humans are equalized, and there's a desire in the other way. Everybody talks about AI and everything. The effect, there will be, expect a counter effect. And the counter effect, if you don't know anymore whether you watch a video, whether it's real or not, guess what's going to happen? We're going to lose interest. And then the counter effect is that we're going to sit down and you will see it's a good thing to invest in what Jack does, in physically bringing people together. And so here I am, and you hear it from the horse's mouth, what I'm saying, and we can have an actual conversation with each other. It's the counterbalance. But allow for both, right? And it moves forward. I actually believe, I'm just doing some work on that with some folks in Elkhart, Indiana. I believe that manufacturing is coming back to the United States big time. It's time, together with robotics, with AI, and with the geopolitical situation, it's just time for manufacturing to come back. And in our school, we're really starting to focus on that.
Anybody else?
I just want to make a comment, less of the question, but the comment, how blessed we were. I'm Polish, so obviously I love John Paul II and what influence he had on you, but also on the world, changed the world. So this is just a comment that we will never forget what he stood for dignity of the human being. Like you said, that you started believing in yourself.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed that part of the speech, how you live you are the testimony you were around him.
I'm trying to testify for him, and I'll give you another quick tidbit of something he taught us.
Thank you.
I go around now, I talk to many people about John Paul II, and one of the common things I hear, and there's probably people in this room who feel that way, that they go, be it to Denver, or maybe you saw them in Poland or something like that, which are millions of people there, and they say, well, but he spoke to me. And then one person in a million people, and they're like, but I was there and he spoke and I felt he's speaking to me. And they actually asked him, Holy Father, what is that all about? Like, you can, even then it was said that way. And they asked him, what do you do to make that happen? And he's like, nothing. And he says, but I give you one tip. Focus on people. And so he says, before I go into a room to meet somebody, before I go in a church to say Mass and have a homily with people, or I go to the audience, I call to mind the fact that if God wouldn't love the person in front of me, any one of us, to the extent that if that was the only person alive, he would give his only son to save that person. That's how much God loves that person. If God, your presence, your physical presence is a testimony that God loves you, right? Because if God wouldn't love you, poof, you would just snap and you would just dissolve into nothingness. So the fact that this person is in front of you means that God loves them crazily. And here it comes. So before I open the door, I say, Lord, give me your eyes. Holy Spirit, come Holy Spirit. He said, the prayer for the Holy Spirit is the one thing that God never denies you. You can pray for $1 million or to have great looks or be shorter or taller and maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. But you pray for the Holy Spirit, the Lord grants it. And he says, come Holy Spirit, give me your eyes. I think that is what is the achievement in a sense, and it goes back to his original view of seeing the individual human dignity of every person as a representation of God's creation, like this is, in his image and likeness.
I have a question. So I'm sitting here thinking, I've been to so many churches and I've heard so many Christians talk about God and Jesus and love. Do you think there'll ever be a day when we will put aside denominations and for all those that love God and Jesus, focus maybe on one or two things that we could work collaboratively on and change in this world?
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears. I think that's one of the great hopes that that's the great hope of the church, right? And I want you to understand that there's, just now we hear some hiccups or so on, but did you, for example, know that under Pope Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger, like the Lutherans and the Catholics have an understanding of justification, so that their works, faith alone, works sola scriptura, sola fide, that has been resolved. Like the Church, the Lutherans have no longer this theological difference with the Catholics, and the Catholics not with the Lutherans, because they came together and said, yes, we understand each other now, and this is actually, and they put this to bed. Now, the division, of course, doesn't go away, because the only thing I can tell you, maybe we're coming at this from the wrong side. Let's not make this a theological issue, make this an issue of going into the neighborhoods. How many neighborhoods do you have that you like to fix? And where you like to start to have a mind for the poor rather than a heart for the poor, and you actually want to liberate people to live up to their full potential, then let's get together around that. And I think that is ecumenism on the street. There are so many evangelical friends I have, Pentecostals, Baptists, evangelicals, where we go together. Actually, I started a company, somebody else started it, and it starts like a good joke. We did work in Africa. We were we basically had created a bank in Africa, but it's a senior collateral lender. And it starts an Anglican, a Pentecostal, and a Catholic get together, right? And that was it. I was the Catholic. And we went after entrepreneurs in these faith groups, because I found that entrepreneurs need incubators, especially when there's no rule of law. And the mega church is an incubator because they have the rule of the Lord. And so they don't cheat each other. So then that becomes the incubation. And so we called it the Carpenter's Fund. And do you know how many people didn't get it? They said, do you only go for carpenters, or can other people apply? Yeah.
One more question, anybody?
I thought I heard you mention something called OTF.
Oh, yeah.
What does that stand for?
Man, you listen very well. What else do you have there?
I took notes.
Oh, good. It's the company I used to run. It's called On the Frontier. It's the Productivity Frontier. It was a company that was a part of the Monitor Group, which is Michael Porter, like the strategy guru from Harvard Business School. He and other business school professors had this company called Monitor Group, and in it was this division, this small company that focused on emerging, like uncertain business strategy, like environments. And I ended up taking that, being hired to run that, and I spun it out as its own company, and we called it OTF, On the Frontier Group. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? Yeah. I want to tell you a story that Chuck Colson told me, that God's ways are not our ways, and that he uses the least likely to do the greatest work. And he said, let's go back to the 80s. And there's a man in the Gdansk shipyards with a high school degree. And he says, I'm going to organize the men in a union in communist Poland.
Against the law.
That's like this guy we lost the other day in Russia, right? All right? For 500 straight years, every pope had been an Italian cardinal.
Yeah.
And then they elect, I think, the first Polish pope ever. We elect a Hollywood actor whose biggest movie was Bedtime with Bonzo. A monkey. My dad was a Democrat through and through. He called Reagan Bonzo, okay? All right. England has this iron-willed lady, Margaret Thatcher. Yeah. And Russia has Gorbachev. And Chuck Colson says, Jack, those 5 people, led by John Paul II, freed hundreds of millions of people from communism without one bullet.
Yeah, not a drop of blood. I see this. I was so privileged that on June 3rd, 1988, Ronald Reagan came to see John Paul II, and I was one of the honor guards at the entrance to the Papal Palace. And I counted it. I was standing there. There's footage on the library, the Reagan's library of him arriving. I remember standing there and just counting 1 car, 2 car, 3 car. He came like with 3 different ways in the helicopter, and then he was in one of them, and the rest was decoys. 32 cars. And he comes in, what? 1987. Yeah, give or take a little. And he comes in, and the first thing I thought, he comes out of the car, and I'm like, man, this guy looks old. And he comes in and he goes inside and he meets with John Paul II, and for a lifetime. They talk and talk. Of course, they're alone in a room, right? And so nobody talks, but he comes out, and in the meantime, it's the protocol. The spouse of the president gets a tour of the Sistine Chapel and St. Peter's, and so they close things off. And they change, because for the picture with the Pope, she's dressed in one way, and then she goes to the dress other. And Nancy was like a very stylish lady, and she comes out, and I'm standing there in the courtyard, San Damaso, and I stand here. The stairs are here, and up here is the tribune with all the journalists on it. They're all perched on this thing, and I'm standing in attention. Literally, I'm just a statue. I'm not there for security, just to look good, and I'm standing in attention. And then I could tell that they're coming, because suddenly, clack, 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 and I see all this. All I see is whoosh, and Nancy Reagan falls down the last stairs right at my feet. I just look, I'm standing like this, I'm looking down, and she's like right in front of me on the floor, and looking around, and I'm like, well, lady, I'm holding a halberd here. I'm not, it wasn't my job to help. All the security came, including also Reagan, to try to get her up, but they were all on top of her, so she couldn't get up. But eventually, they got her up, and then they got into their limousine and drove away. Now, one of my best friends that I met there, an Augustinian, Father Peter Gorey, he studied there canon law with the Augustinians, And he just got such a kick out of this that he says, you know, the president needs to know this. And I wouldn't have said anything, but he said, and unbeknownst to me, he wrote to the president, like as an American priest in Rome, he wrote to Reagan and said, listen, this kid that Nancy fell down the stairs with, he's a great fan of America. He has a girlfriend who's American, and he wants to go to America, and just throw him a bone, you know? And so soon, like a month or two afterwards, I received a package from the President of the United States with a flag and the picture of him being there and signed with Nancy and Ronald as thanking me for my service.
You've led a fabulous life.
Praise God. Now yeah.
And God's got greater things for the rest of your life, greater than you imagine.
Yeah.
I read the other day that if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah.
Or cry.
Yeah, exactly. It's close.
So thanks a million for coming.
Thank you.
It's been an honor. Our next session is not till May 22nd. And Dr. Scott Hahn, he got potential.
We have the same beard.
And he's going to talk The Road to Emmaus, Cultivating Eucharistic Amazement. May 22nd, you know, he started the St. Paul Center. Great work that they're doing. So, carrot cake, cupcakes, get them before Andreas, because I don't think he's ever shared a meal or food on his plate in his life. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you. Thank you.
Praise God. Thank you.